Hi guys, greetings and welcome. If you're new to Mordhau and looking for ways to improve, then you're at the right place. This will be a series of videos with specific topics, and my intent is to help newer players through the harsh learning curve Mordhau presents. And I'm pretty sure that watching my tips will cut off quite some hours of your learning curve. Mordhau has a very high skill ceiling, and it is hard to catch up with veterans from other similar melee combat games, or with players who can invest a lot more time into Mordhau. I'm not really a good player, but I invested a decent amount of hours into this game. Usually I have to compensate my lack of mechanical skills with practice and knowledge. So I believe I'm the right guy to bring you up to speed, because I know about the bumps in the road and how to overcome them. The first topic will be about the input setup. Timing is crucial at Mordhau. As keybinds and such are a very personal thing, there's no one and only setup I could present you. So it is imperative that you have an input setup that is comfortable, logical, and most of all intuitive to you personally. I will point out the important things to consider and will tell you about my tests, specifically the benefits and faults with certain setups. Though I never tried a gamepad controller, so I cannot tell you anything about that. This might be a bit technical overall, but if you want to improve at Mordhau, then sitting down and think your input setup through and maybe even overhauling your setup is the right thing in the long run. And if you come to the conclusion that you already have the optimal setup for you personally, even better. Alright, so I assume that you at least did the tutorial. Apart from that, I will be explaining from ground zero. So bear with me if I'm being thorough here. I will catch up to your knowledge level pretty quickly, so don't be bored. Mordhau offers you 3 predefined control schemes by default: 240, hybrid and classic, and those didn't mean anything to me as I started this game. 240, what is that? Hybrid of what? And classic, what is classic? I just got this game. So classic refers to the fact that the developers from Mordhau come from Chivalry. So in Chivalry you had to use a keybind for every attack angle, and this refers to this side of the spectrum from your control scheme that you bind every attack angle. Classic, like in Chivalry. The 240 is the other side of the spectrum, where you determine your angle where your attack is coming from with your mouse, and hybrid is something in between. But you don't have to use any of those schemes. You just have to understand all the options you got and just put it to your own custom ways. Of course you can test them out, but yeah, I will just go through all the options. Let us have a look at the 240 system. So why is it called 240? Because you lag out on some degrees on the 360 circle. You cannot perform a perfect overhead attack, same with the lower strikes. You lag out 60 degrees on the top and 60 on the bottom, so that leaves you with 240. On the crosshair there's a little arrow. When I move my mouse to the right, the arrow is pointing to the right and the attack will be coming from there. And so on. I guess your first question now is, okay, what is better, the 240 or the keybinds? Well, everything indicates that keybinds are just straight better. From all the top tier players currently, the majority uses keybinds. Though you could argue that the majority of top tier players right now are old Chivalry veterans, so they are just used to the keybind system with thousands of hours. So, but also in theory, when you are free to use your mouse completely to manipulate your swings and are not wasting mouse movement for directing the attack angle, that is just straight better. So basically it comes down to how much keybinds you can handle. I personally just run out of fingers. So in my opinion the 240 system is something of a convenience solution to just fill in the blanks you cannot handle with direct keybinds. To newer players I would still suggest to use the 240 system though, because I think it would be too overwhelming to use a lot of keybinds initially, at least if you don't have a vast amount of experience with similar games already. It is more important that you get a feeling for the combat system in general, the timings and the weapon ranges and so on. Just gather some experience. And after a while you can start incorporating single keybinds from single attacks in your playstyle and just work your way up then. Okay, let's have a look at the control settings. Toggle sprint. Basically you want to sprint all the time during fighting, but you can't regenerate stamina when you're sprinting. I personally am not able to properly micromanagement when I have toggle activated, so I just kinda hold the sprint button all the time, and I just release it when I see an opportunity to regenerate stamina during a fight. The next options to inverse your attack just do what they say. They inverse the attack direction. So if you do not have them activated, then the arrow will just be pointing in the direction your mouse is moving. On the other hand, if you activate it, it will just be on the opposite. So initially I thought that would be awesome, because wherever you move your mouse, the sword or your weapon will follow. Even though it feels awesome to have the mouse movement directly translate to your weapon movement. The problem is, for me personally, I am not able to chamber like that, because you need to mirror the attack, and it is much easier to see where the attack is coming from and just move your mouse in that direction, instead of see where the attack is coming from and just move to the opposite direction. There's also the problem that in order to chamber properly, the weapon traces somewhat have to connect properly. And if the attack is coming from the upper right, I have to move to the lower left with this system, or with the reverse directions. And as I'm moving away from the weapon tracer from the opponent, I might fail to connect the weapon tracers. But that might be my personal problem. I think chambering, or at least the option to be able to chamber properly, is quite important. Well, maybe just test it out, I leave it to your own discretion. The next option is to angle the attack after press. If you do not have that checked, then when you press the mouse button with the 240 system, the attack will start right away. If you have it checked, then you can press the mouse button, and as long as you don't move your mouse, you won't attack. You can just click your mouse button and it will still attack, but in the direction the arrow is already facing. So now the arrow is to the somewhat upper right, and I just click my mouse button, it just attacks. I hold my mouse button, I release my mouse button, and it will attack. I hold my mouse button, nothing happens, and I move my mouse to the left, and the attack is coming from the left. There are different opinions about that. I personally think I have more control if I have that option checked, but it is up to you. I used to chamber a lot with the 240 system, and with that, somewhat I just see, okay, my opponent is attacking, I press my left mouse button, and then I just see where the attack is coming from and move in that direction. And with that, I can chamber pretty properly. Alright, so in general about the 240 system, if you angle the attack after the press of the mouse button, there are two different opinions. The one would be, okay, I want my attack to start as fast as possible, so I do not check it. But if you want to control where the attack is coming from, you still would have to input with your mouse the direction and then press your mouse button. So you still have two inputs. And if it's a hectic fight, to be totally conscious about where to move your mouse and then press the mouse button, to me it's very difficult. I can just press the mouse button, and after I pressed it, then move the mouse in the proper direction. To me it gives me more reliable control. The option to have the mouse being used to flip the attack side is somewhat of a hybrid option. So if you have a specific attack angle bound to a specific key or input, for example, I have my upper right strike bound to mouse wheel up, I can still flip the attack side with just my mouse. So when the arrow is pointing to the right and I use the scroll wheel up, the upper strike will come from the right still. If I have it to the left, the upper strike will also be coming from the left. So There's a keybind to flip your attack side if you have a specific attack angle bound to a key or an input, but you can also use the mouse for that. And I personally just run out of fingers. I just personally use the mouse to flip the attack side to all the attacks I have bound with a certain attack angle. One thing of note here is that the angle attack after press is not working with the flip attack side if you use a specific input for a specific attack angle. So, for example, my right strike is bound to a specific input. I cannot press the input and then move the mouse to the left to have it come from the left. The input just starts right away, so I have to determine the direction with the mouse beforehand. It just goes against the very concept that you want to generally separate your movement or your movement inputs from your attack inputs, so you don't have them meddling against each other. If you have to influence your attack angle with the movement while you're trying to footwork, ranges and so on, no. Well, last but not least, the option is there. Test it out for yourself. I cannot imagine a scenario where you really want that. The sensitivity is just your own comfort level when you are not swinging a weapon. So yeah, don't crank it up in the hope to just be able to helicopter your way through different opponents. This is just not working. There are turn caps, and as soon as you start your swing, you will have the turn cap enabled. Alright, that only leaves the key bindings. So there's the normal movement. I won't go into any spectator things or like that. You can see you have the strike and the step option, as well as specific strike and step options. The strike and the step option is your 240 option. If you have that bound, this will be your 240 option, where you have the mouse or the arrow thingy determine where the attack angle is coming from. Apart from the 240 option, you have the possibility to bind every single attack angle. If you have enough fingers and keybinds and you can handle all of them, go for it, because it just leaves you so much control about your fighting. I'm just not able to handle that much inputs. So I bound the right versions to specific inputs, and I'm using the mouse to determine the side. And this is working well enough for me, even though it is not on paper the most optimal way to play this game. So you have the option to put your feint and your parry on one input, and the question is, does it make sense? Because you have to care about so much input settings and keybinds and such. Freeing up one of them is a very appealing option, but I highly advise against that. There are a lot of hectic moments in Mordhau, and well, I personally am not able to be calm enough to just press the input once if I want to feint. If I want to feint, I might even spam the input, and then if I would have bound parry as well on that same input, I would just accidentally parry all the time. It is up to you, test it out. I think it is important to have the strike, feint, parry and step assigned to different fingers, because these are for very specific options. You want to input it right away. The kick can meddle with your movement fingers, because if you use the kick, your movement stops anyways. So the feint, I would really love to not have it bound to my movement fingers, but yeah, I just can't handle any more inputs on my mouse to properly incorporate the feint. So it is the Q because it is close to my movement WASD. I suggest that you put your jump and your crouch on reliable keybinds that you can just get on time, on point every time, because you can incorporate the crouch and jumping to evade some attacks pretty reliable. Apart from that, you might want to bind the cycle camera to something you can reach easily and fast. That lets you switch between first person and third person point of view. In general, if you are fighting a single opponent, I highly suggest to use the first person view, because you can just read and see the animations so much clearer, because your own player model is not in the way. Alright, so basically you have all the important options explained now. The rest is pretty much self-explanatory. But I would like to give you some things to consider along the way when you plan out or think about your input setup, how you personally want to go about it. To bring it all together at the end, as a general rule of thumb, you want to separate your movement inputs from your attack inputs, so you're able to move around freely as you see fit, and footwork, as it's called in this game, as much as possible without impairing how you angle your attacks and so on and so on. Stuff you will need to be able to input very fast, intuitively, and so on and so on are strike, stab, parry, feint, crouch, and kick. And you can use crouch and jump on the same finger, but yeah, there are a lot of inputs I think should be on separate fingers, because you need them in your fighting style. So my very personal struggle was to really set down where you want the parry to be, because I really found it to be very intuitive and very well working to have the stab on the right mouse button and the strike on the left mouse button. I wasn't happy with that about the parry part. I switched parry to the thumb button then, and well, morphing was awesome, chambering was awesome, and all the attacks were awesome, but even after about 50 hours I was still accidentally pressing the right mouse button when I tried to parry, because I was just so used to just parry with the right mouse button from all the other games. So yeah, I just went back to have parry on the right mouse button. But it is up to you, maybe you can incorporate it otherwise. And well, I just then like to have my stab on the thumb mouse button, because I just reassigned my mouse wheel up. If you keep your stab on the mouse wheel up, like it's default, then I might suggest to put the upper strike on the mouse wheel down. That allows for an easy morph from stab to an upper strike, or vice versa. And it gives you very good options for messy team fights, so you have precise attacks, a stab and an overhead, depending on which attack type your weapon favors. Thank you for listening, and see you on the battlefield.
All together! Onward to glory!